black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know.
And I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun, grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. Going to be speaking to Rick and John. And Rick had an interesting encounter back in the 70s. A very, very interesting encounter. He was doing a wounded rabbit call, and something responded to him. And, you know, a lot of people ask me when I talk about the Sasquatch screaming, I always say it sounds like a demon or like a woman screaming. But here, you know, when I was in Texas, here is the scream that I heard. This is almost identical to the scream that I heard, except for it was very much more powerful and had a lot more bass behind it. But take a listen. There's a couple Sasquatches going off in this audio recording, but the one you want to listen for is the one that just has a banshee-type scream. Take a listen. And it's that one there in the background that's just really going off that you hear, the one screaming. That's what I heard in Texas. And it got me thinking about Rick's encounter and Rick talking about hearing the Ohio howl, and I'll play it later in the show. But when you hear strange sounds like that, trying to compare it to a known animal, it's interesting to look at, and it's interesting to grab a piece of audio and go, is this what you heard? And that's what we'll be doing tonight, and Rick will be sharing his encounter. I'll also be inviting John to the show, and John had a very interesting light encounter, and I've been talking about the lights over the last couple weeks and trying to get witnesses to come on. I know it's not necessarily Bigfoot related, but as I always say, there's a lot of other things you can run into besides Bigfoot in the forest. So I welcome John to the show. He's a logger, and I love talking to loggers because they're always out in the forest, and if anyone's going to see something like this, it's going to be a logger or a hunter. So pay attention to what John is talking about with regard to the lights. But let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Rick to the show. Rick, thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Wes. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being on. And I know you had an incident when you were bow hunting. If you would, for the audience, just kind of walk us into what happened that strange night. I remember I was reading the encounter you had sent to the BFRO, and I was shocked by it. But if you would, just kind of start from the beginning. Tell us what you guys were doing and walk us into what happened.
Yeah, we had a place that we bow hunted on, and it was about 30 miles away from where I lived, about the only place close to us that really had any deer to speak of back then. And this was, I don't know, I was probably 17, 18 at the time, and this was, I would guess, 78, somewhere around in that time frame. And we'd go down on the weekends, and there was a old abandoned barn that the farmer, he let us stay in, and that's where we'd go and we'd set up camp and whatnot, and huge tract of woods. And in the BFR report, I've got directions right to where exactly how to get to the place. But it was bordered, on that side where we went in and where we camped was off Nelsonville Road or something like that. I don't recall. It's in the report. But the other side of the woods was bordered by the Kentucky Turnpike, and it's a huge, huge patch of woods. I couldn't even begin to recall how many acres it was. It was just huge. And there was nothing down there. I mean, absolutely nothing but just woods as far as you could see once you got in there. There was a train track that bordered the woods that we typically walk down, and, we'd walk about a mile back in there, and we'd hit the woods, and, we'd bow hunt and whatnot. And there was 4 or 5 of us that would go down there all the time. And one weekend there was me and 2 other buddies that went down there, and it was fall afternoon. We'd hunted that morning, and we'd come back to camp, whatnot, and we're sitting around. I was like, well, let's, do a little scouting. And we'd always go back and just kind of slip through the woods and look for sign or whatnot. And we were all 3 walking through the woods, and we'd stay about 100 yards apart, look for sign, and kind of give hand signals to one another and things like that. And we'd come up the top of the small ridge, and as soon as we hit the top of it, the second we hit the top of it, I looked down in the bottom below, and at probably 200 yards off, it just something caught my eye, and it was just in an instant. It's like, that's not supposed to be there. It's like, this thing was solid black. It was a sunny day. You could see it perfect. I mean, it was just, when I say you could see it perfect, I could see something black that was there. And this probably lasted 2 or 3 seconds, and it was gone. It was just out of sight. And I thought, what in the world? And never even dreamed, that Bigfoot, Sasquatch would never even dreamed anything like that. Never even crossed my mind. Actually, the first thing that crossed my mind was it might have been a cow that got out, because there was a farmer close by that raised Holsteins, but I thought, no, there's no way. I mean, that was a 1.5 miles away, 2 miles, for that cow to have gotten that far down to the woods, and there's just no way. It was too deep a wood. So, I just kind of blew it off. And when we met back up later, and I asked my buddies if they'd seen anything, they're like, nah, we didn't see nothing out of the ordinary. And so I just kind of blew it off, and back to camp we went. We hunted that evening, and we got back to camp, and it was right at dusk. We'd had supper, and we were getting ready to call it a night. Back in those days, I smoked, and I said, what the heck? And I pulled the cellophane off a pack of cigarettes and squeezed it real tight between my thumbs and started blowing on it. And there were tons of foxes down there where we hunt. I mean, just fox everywhere. We thought, well, we'll try and call one up. And we were sitting right there at the barn loft, right at the window where you'd pull your hay in at. And we're sitting right there, and I'm blowing on this thing. And all the dogs around, they just, there were some farms on the outskirts on the main road, but, once you got back in the woods, there weren't nothing. But I started blowing on this thing, and I hadn't been blowing on it, no time at all. And from back in the woods, which it seemed like a long ways, this sound started, and it froze us instantly. I never heard nothing like it. And in my report, I think to the BFRO, I'd stated that it sounded identical to that Ohio moan. Well, the only thing that was different on this was when this thing started up, all the dogs and everything went dead silent. It didn't aggravate them and them keep barking. No, it just got dead silent. Even the bugs stopped. It was that loud and that intense, and it just kind of started as a low moan and just kept getting louder and louder, and then just kind of cut off. And we kind of all 3 were sitting there like, what in the heck? And my buddy's like, man, he's like, cut the crap. He's like, what the heck was that sound? And because all of us, we'd spent, we'd always been out in the woods fishing and hunting and never, ever heard anything like that. But nonetheless, me being the goob that I was, I'm like, well, I'm going to hit it again. I'm going to try this one more time. So I blew on that thing again, and I'm not kidding you, this time it was a lot closer, and it was a lot louder, and this time it